Hello and welcome to Matt's Mindspace, where we discuss TCG related topics. And today's topic I'd like to discuss Altered and keywords. Keywords are shortcuts for most trading card games, including Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh!, where a developer will insert a keyword that everybody universally understands to save a lot on text space on the card itself. So on screen is the list of keywords that Altered uses, and we're going to be going through each one by one with a quick description of what it actually does, along with the card that I feel best represents this that I found interesting. It's not necessarily the best card for the keyword, but something that represents it well. So we will start with the keyword After You, which is almost exclusive to the Eastmere faction and its hero Akesha and Taru. The After You effect is really interesting because it's only specific. It allows you to skip your turn and pass to the opponent without playing a card. This gives you an extreme advantage in terms of information about what your opponent has, and they are always going to be starting first. The key with Akesha is you can only use this effect on your turn, but that doesn't matter because if it's your opponent's turn, then they'll be going first anyway, and then that's followed by you. So it stops you forcing your opponent to play twice, which is a fair balance to the rule. On to our next ability, we have Anchored. Anchored is a specific state which is applied to your character, where at the end of the day, they do not get placed from the expedition into the reserve. They then lose the status at the end of the day, but remain in the expedition. I chose Asmodeus for the representation of Anchored because I love this artwork. I also wanted to make sure that Lyra got some representation, the faction that Asmodeus is in with this rare card, and I am a little bit of a fan of the luck play, so it was just an easy pick here. So moving on to the Athena card that we have here for the representation of the fleeting effect. Fleeting is a rather big one because I feel that this is often misunderstood. So when a character comes from reserve onto the expedition, it gains fleeting from this, and what fleeting is fleeting when the character would then be placed back into reserve. If it has a fleeting token, this does not happen. It is immediately placed into the discard. This is key because it specifically wants you to be returned into the reserve. So if it's instead bounced to hand, it would still return to hand, but if it would be bounced to reserve, it is immediately discarded. This is key for a lot of certain card removal effects that just put things into reserve. You want to target things with fleeting if you want them to then be discarded instead. So to summarize, cards that have fleeting, if they were to be put into the reserve, they do instead go to discard, and cards that remove cards back into reserve, if they have fleeting, are automatically discarded as well, with exception from cards that return characters to hand. So let's move on to Gigantic, and I've chosen Atlas as the out-of-faction rare because I am a huge fan of the fact that it applies Gigantic not only to itself, but to tokens, which for Ortis is fantastic. What Gigantic does, as it stays straight on the card, is that he is considered present in each of your expeditions. That means he is in the hero and companion expedition, and therefore targetable in both. This is strong because you can consider all of his stats as doubled as they apply themselves to, of course, both expeditions, and in this case, any tokens you control do the same thing. The only downside is, as I've stated, he is targetable in both expeditions. If a character would target something in the companion expedition and Atlas is sat in the hero expedition, because he is present in both, he is still targetable in the companion expedition, so keep that in mind. So coming up is the Seasoned effect, and the Seasoned effect is actually rather simple. It's if this card would be placed into the reserve, it keeps any boosts it has, and we will cover boosts as well in a moment. These boosts are then still there when the Bravo's Blade Dancer is replayed onto the field, and would only lose them if she is returned to hand or otherwise placed in the discard pile. I chose this one to represent the card, as I feel it's very good with its secondary effect, where it consistently gains boost every time it enters the expedition, until it's on its 5th boost. Then it no longer loses fleeting, and it will at the end of that particular turn be placed in discard and lose everything. This is a very good card to just keep going early game and keep Bravos in the game early, and I find that really good as it matches up to Hua Mulan in Izmir for a similar reason. Next up we have Resupply. This is also a rather simple effect, and it's quite simply you take the top card of your deck and place it into reserve. And that's it. That's Resupply, and it's very powerful if you have a deck that likes to play a lot of things from reserve, or if there are certain effects from revealing the card. More importantly, card draw is, in most trading card games, pretty effective in any form that is presented. Unfortunately, this is giving information to your opponent, and rather than the card going to hand, but this is still rather powerful in its own right. And we move on to Eternal. Now this is a card and a half. I love this card. Its common is not so great, but I have a surprise at the end to offset that little negative. So Eternal is a special keyword, as it is only on this one particular character in the entire game. It currently is not applied to anyone else, and it is just, it's like Anchored during rest. During rest I do not go to reserve, but this is permanent, and unlike Anchored, it is consistent from turn to turn. The Hydrocana here is also going to gain boosts every single turn, and just constantly get stronger, and you need to deal with this before it becomes a very large problem. And up next we have the boosts that I mentioned earlier. So a boost is just a +1/+1/+1 to your 3 stats. So in this case, gain 3 boost would make this 1/1/1 to a 4/4/4. That's all there is to it. The boost is the bread and butter of the TCG. You will definitely be playing in all factions cards that do this, and you need to be wary, for example, like the previous card, the Hydrocana, which will give itself 4 boosts every turn. You have to be very careful that your opponent might just play something like this, where suddenly they have a 4/4/4 out of nowhere for 3 mana. And I've picked the Kategiran Alchemist, as this is a fantastic option for Izmir for a very, very cheap 3 mana for 4/4/4. It only applies this boost from the hand, which is why it's from reserve cost is 1. But it is a fantastic, fantastic economic card for what it does. And now we go to Sabotage. Sabotage is an absolute fantastic ability. I'm a huge fan because we've discussed a lot about cards today that do a lot of things from reserve or have from reserve effects, or you have to be careful what kind of things they have when they come from reserve to expedition or from expedition to reserve. Sabotage is the answer. Sabotage is quite simply target one card in reserve and place it in the discard, which can get rid of a few headaches, particularly spells that don't have fleeting on them. You do not want to see repeat spells or characters with season that are just powering up, or characters that constantly drop fleeting like Hua Mulan in Izmir and Bravos, the rare form, not the common form so much. Keep an eye on that. You will need the Sabotage option if your faction can offer it to you. Continuing on, we have the Tough keyword. This is a rather unique one, as it's also not on too many characters. However, the Muna Bastion, the Spindle, as shown here, is able to apply it to any character on your expeditions, which is really, really, really important. The Tough keyword makes anything that target your characters cost more. So in this case it's tough 2, so everything would cost 2 more. However, there are some characters with tough 1 or tough 2 as well, and this affects stacks. So if they have tough 2 and then they gain tough 2 from the Spindle, this is now tough 4. This affects stacks and works together, so it will increase anything that costs 1 to cast will then suddenly cost 5 to cast on your characters. So don't consider, for example, Kraken's Wrath is a 5-costed card. That would then become 9, and that's pretty powerful to think about, that your cards start to become a little bit more untouchable or very expensive to get rid of. You can, of course, control 2 of the spindle at once, so this effect can stack further if necessary. Moving on, we have one of the last few keywords. This one is boosted, not to be confused with boost. Boosted is the state that your character is in if it has at least 1 boost. So if it has 4 boosts, it is boosted and 4 boost. And I've picked the Tiny Djinn here because I feel that any advantage you can gain on increasing your mana size faster is absolutely incredible, and Tiny Djinn definitely helps here. Second to last, we have the Asleep effect, and I've picked a spell for this due to a recent draft where I had this laid on me and my entire board put to sleep. The status effect of Asleep is it's similar to Anchored. Your characters won't be put into reserve at the end of turn, however their stats are not counted for the resolution at the end of day, making them Anchored but 0/0/0 effectively. The fact that this is on a 4-costed spell in Lyra is, for me, just crazy. And I am not looking forward to playing against Lyra in the future because of it. You can take advantage of the Asleep status effect negatively or positively. You can apply it to yourself from other sources to give yourself a chance to boost the character in the next turn, or apply some other effect, or shut down your opponent's powerful monster for a turn if necessary. And lastly, Defender. Defender is you'll find it mostly in Muna and Ordis. I'm not 100% sure where else you might find it, but the point of it is, as long as you have anybody with Defender on your companion or hero side, you will not advance in your expedition that turn. The Verdant Bag Rare at least has the condition where as long as you control 2 plants, then you're fine. But the usual trade-off for Defender is that you have high stats on a low mana costed card, usually to try to block your opponent while you dominate on the other side. I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of the effect, and I will definitely be avoiding it where possible in decks that I create, because I'm just not a fan of cards that can't advance my game state without reasonable plausible grounds. So that's all the keywords in Altered with a little quick overview, and to end the video I'd like to highlight a unique. I would like to do this at the end of every video, so I will start with one of mine, and hopefully in the future I'd like to showcase good and bad ones in the long run. So I'm pretty sure I butchered the name of this common, but I'll try again here, and I believe I'm going to show off the Hydrokaina again. So this unique is a complete difference to the common and the rare. In this case, it gains Eternal as long as it has 1 boost, which is not super difficult to do in Muna with the right setups, but it automatically has Tough 2 built in, which is of course going to stack with the Spindle, making this card very, 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 very sticky. At noon, I can put a card from my hand into reserve, and target character gains 3 boosts. This includes itself, so it can still gain a lot of strength over time, while still remaining sticky with at least Tough 2, and I preferably would have 1 Spindle making it Tough 4, which also gives it a boost at noon to a character, all with its rare version. I think it's a very strong card. It's rated quite highly in the unique rankings right now in the unofficial website. I'm pretty happy about that. And I'm going to leave it there. This has been Mad's Mindspace. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.